The first thing Amanda Perez placed on the conference table wasn't her notebook or the keys to the CEO's office. It was a faded blue hospital wristband with a smudged barcode. The room fell silent. One emergency physician stared at it, then slowly at her face, his own turning pale with recognition. 2 years earlier, that same wristband had been wrapped around her mother's arm while they were told to keep waiting. Amanda didn't come back for revenge. She came back to make sure no family would ever leave this hospital carrying a memory like hers. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. I'd love to see how far this story travels, and if heartfelt stories about courage, compassion, and second chances speak to you, consider subscribing so you won't miss the next one. Long before Amanda Perez became the woman who could silence an entire boardroom with a faded blue wristband, she was simply someone the world rarely noticed. At 4:45 every morning, while most of Pittsburgh was still asleep, the soft vibration of her alarm buzzed across the scratched nightstand beside her bed. She never allowed it to ring. Rosa was a light sleeper, and Ethan had school. Waking them was one more thing Amanda refused to do. She sat up slowly, rubbing the stiffness from her shoulders after another 12-hour overnight shift. Her back ached from lifting residents at Evergreen Care Center, a nursing home 15 miles from her apartment. Some nights she helped bathe elderly patients. Other nights she cleaned them, after accidents, changed dressings, calmed frightened dementia patients, or simply sat beside someone who didn't want to die alone. No one applauded people like Amanda. When families visited on weekends, they thanked the nurses and doctors. Few remembered the CNA who had quietly held their father's hand at 3 in the morning. Amanda never complained. She believed dignity wasn't measured by who noticed your work, but by how faithfully you did it. She slipped into the tiny kitchen of their 2-bedroom apartment without turning on the overhead light. A small lamp above the sink cast a warm glow across the chipped countertop. The apartment wasn't much to look at. The linoleum floor had started peeling near the refrigerator. One cabinet door refused to close completely. The dishwasher hadn't worked in 3 years, but everything was spotless. Amanda had grown up believing that poverty and disorder were 2 different things. She couldn't always control money, but she could control how much care she put into the place her family called home. She filled the old coffee maker with the last scoop of ground coffee. While it brewed, she opened a navy blue notebook that always sat beside the sugar jar. On the first page, written in careful handwriting, were the words, "3 things I'm grateful for today." Every morning, no matter how exhausted she felt, Amanda wrote exactly 3 things. Some mornings they were big, most mornings they weren't. Today she wrote, "Mom slept through the night." Ethan smiled after finishing his history project. "My old Corolla started yesterday." She stared at the 3rd sentence and smiled to herself. Anyone driving a 15-year-old Toyota understood why that counted as a blessing. The smell of coffee drifted through the apartment. A bedroom door opened. "You're awake already?" Amanda looked up. Her mother, Rosa Perez, shuffled slowly toward the kitchen, wearing a faded lavender cardigan, despite the warmth inside. "I was hoping to make breakfast before you got up," Rosa said. Amanda laughed softly. "Which cardiologist told you cooking before sunrise was good for your heart?" "The same one who keeps telling me not to enjoy anything." Amanda crossed the room and kissed her mother's forehead. "He tells you not to overwork yourself." "I raised you. I know the difference." Their conversations often sounded like this, gentle, playful, filled with the kind of love that needed no dramatic declarations. Amanda reached into the refrigerator. "We're having eggs." "I wanted pancakes." "You wanted pancakes yesterday." "I still want pancakes." "You also want to ignore your sodium restrictions." Rosa sighed dramatically. "You've become impossible." "No." Amanda cracked 2 eggs into a bowl. "I've become your daughter." That made Rosa smile. While breakfast cooked, another bedroom door creaked open. 12-year-old Ethan Perez appeared wearing basketball shorts and an oversized school t-shirt. His hair stuck out in every direction. "Morning," he mumbled. Amanda pointed toward the bathroom. "Hair." He touched it. "Oh." Rosa chuckled. "You look like you wrestled a tornado." The tornado won. He disappeared again, making both women laugh. Moments like these were tiny, forgettable to anyone else. To Amanda, they were everything, because she knew how fragile ordinary mornings could be. After breakfast, Amanda lined up Rosa's medications on the kitchen table. White pills, blue pills, one tiny yellow capsule. She checked each bottle carefully before handing over a glass of water. Rosa rolled her eyes. "You know I can do this myself." "I know? So why do you still watch me?" Amanda waited until the last pill disappeared. "Because it helps me breathe." For just a second, Rosa's expression softened. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For making your life so heavy." Amanda immediately shook her head. "You've never been heavy." "You work nights." "I do." "You study during the day." "I do." "You raise Ethan." "I do." "You still come home and take care of me." Amanda knelt beside her mother's chair. "You spent your entire life taking care of me. I was your mother. And now I'm your daughter." Neither of them spoke after that. They didn't need to. Love often sounded loudest in silence. At exactly 6:15, Amanda grabbed her backpack from beside the front door. Inside were 2 textbooks, a laptop with a cracked corner, several color-coded folders, and a stack of flashcards. She was studying healthcare administration through an online university. Most people thought she was chasing a promotion. She wasn't. Amanda had worked inside healthcare long enough to understand something that haunted her. Good people worked in broken systems every day. She had seen nurses cry in supply closets because there weren't enough staff. She had watched residents wait too long because there simply weren't enough hands. She had listened to administrators discuss budgets using numbers that somehow represented real human beings. She didn't hate healthcare. She believed it could become better. But only if someone who understood both compassion and hardship eventually found a seat at the table where decisions were made. That dream seemed impossibly far away. Still, she studied every spare minute. Her old silver Corolla coughed twice before finally starting. "Come on," Amanda whispered, patting the steering wheel. "You can do one more day." The engine reluctantly came to life. "Thank you." Ethan laughed from the passenger seat. "You thank the car." "I thank anything that keeps us moving." He looked at his mother for a moment. "You really mean that?" "I really do." On the drive to school, they passed Memorial Valley Hospital. Its glass entrance reflected the early morning sunlight. Ambulances sat parked outside. Doctors hurried through the revolving doors. Patients entered carrying flowers, backpacks, crutches, and hope. Amanda glanced at the building for only a second before returning her eyes to the road. One day she thought, maybe people like me can help places like that become kinder. She had no idea how cruelly life would test that dream. Nor could she imagine that the hospital disappearing behind her rearview mirror would soon become the place that shattered her heart. And years later, the place where she would return to rebuild far more than its walls. The first warning came on a Tuesday afternoon, hidden inside an ordinary white envelope. Amanda found it wedged between grocery coupons and a local pizza flyer when she returned from Ethan's parent-teacher conference. She unlocked the apartment door with one hand while balancing 2 reusable grocery bags in the other. Rosa was napping in the living room, and the television was quietly playing an old cooking show that she always fell asleep watching. Amanda placed the groceries on the counter before opening the envelope. The pharmacy had adjusted Rosa's prescription coverage. Beginning next month, her heart medication would no longer be fully covered by insurance. Amanda read the letter twice, then a third time. The monthly cost would increase from $83 to $346. She quietly sat down at the kitchen table. $346. That was nearly half of her rent. She grabbed a pen and turned over an old utility bill, instinctively beginning another budget calculation. Rent, electricity, gas, internet for Ethan's school, groceries, car insurance, gasoline, Rosa's medications, her online university tuition. No matter how she rearranged the numbers, they refused to cooperate. She crossed out one column, started another, removed coffee from the grocery list, delayed replacing her worn-out work shoes, canceled the idea of buying Ethan a new backpack before 8th grade started. Still not enough. She leaned back and closed her eyes. For just a moment. Only one moment. Then she folded the letter neatly and slipped it into her notebook. No tears, not yet. Amanda had developed an unusual habit over the years. She never cried before solving the next problem, only after. Sometimes there simply wasn't enough time. The smell of cinnamon drifted from the living room. Rosa had woken up. She was warming yesterday's oatmeal with sliced apples. "You got the mail?" Rosa asked casually. Amanda forced a smile. "Mostly advertisements." Rosa studied her daughter's face for a second longer than usual. "You've never been a good liar." Amanda laughed softly. "I'm getting better." "No." Rosa stirred the oatmeal. "You're just getting quieter." Amanda changed the subject before her mother could ask another question. "How are you feeling today?" "Strong enough to beat you at Scrabble." "That's not strength. It's intelligence." "You make up words. I create vocabulary." Amanda smiled despite herself. Conversations with Rosa had a way of pulling light into heavy afternoons. That evening, Ethan arrived home carrying a permission slip. "Mom." "What is it?" "Our robotics team qualified for the regional competition." Amanda looked up immediately. "That's wonderful." There, he hesitated. She knew that hesitation. It usually meant money. "The registration fee is $125, he quickly added. "It's okay if I can't go." Amanda didn't answer right away. She looked at the permission slip, then at the pharmacy letter inside her notebook, then back at Ethan. "When is it due?" "Next Friday." "I'll figure something out." "You always say that." "And?" "You usually do." He smiled, but Amanda noticed something different. He wasn't expecting her to solve the problem anymore. He was trying to protect her from feeling guilty. 12-year-old boys weren't supposed to carry that kind of awareness. That night after dinner, Amanda logged into the scheduling system at Evergreen Care Center. 2 overnight shifts were available. Friday, Saturday. Both had been left unclaimed. She clicked accept. That meant 36 working hours over 3 days. She didn't hesitate. Exhaustion cost less than disappointment. Around 9 o'clock, she opened her laptop for class. The professor was lecturing about healthcare leadership. One sentence caught Amanda's attention. "Every policy eventually reaches a real person." She wrote it down, circled it twice, then added a note underneath. "Never create rules from behind a desk." Halfway through the lecture, she heard a muffled cough from Rosa's bedroom. Amanda muted the video. "You okay?" "I'm fine." Another cough. "I'm coming in." Rosa was sitting upright on the edge of the bed. One hand rested against the center of her chest. "What happened?" "Just heartburn." Amanda frowned. "You never get heartburn." "I do." "No." Rosa smiled weakly. "I forgot." "You've become the expert." Amanda reached for the blood pressure monitor. Rosa sighed. "You really don't know how to relax." "I'll relax when you stop scaring me." The reading was slightly elevated, not dangerous, but higher than normal. "I'm calling Dr. Patel tomorrow." "You are doing no such thing." "I'm absolutely doing such a thing." It was one bad moment. Amanda gently squeezed her mother's hand. "I don't get to ignore moments anymore." Rosa didn't argue. Instead, she quietly changed the subject. How's school? Amanda knew exactly what her mother was doing. She let it happen anyway. My professor thinks administrators spend too much time looking at spreadsheets. They do. You've met a lot of hospital administrators. I've met enough people who forgot that numbers belong to somebody. Amanda looked at her. When did you become so wise? I've always been wise. You've always been stubborn. Same thing. They both laughed. Later that night, Amanda sat alone at the kitchen table after everyone had gone to bed. She opened the blue gratitude notebook. Her pen hovered over the page. Today she wrote Ethan earned another opportunity. Mom laughed 3 times. We still have each other. She stared at the last sentence. We still have each other. For reasons she couldn't explain, she underlined it. Outside rain began tapping softly against the windows. The weather forecast predicted storms for the rest of the week. Amanda closed the notebook and finally allowed herself a deep breath. She reached into her purse and counted the cash inside. $38. Payday was still 4 days away. The refrigerator was nearly empty again. The Corolla needed new brake pads. The pharmacy bill waited inside her notebook. Ethan's robotics fee sat unsigned on the counter. Her tuition payment reminder appeared in her email. One problem alone never frightened Amanda. It was the way small problems gathered together that wore people down. Like raindrops. One drop couldn't soak you. Thousands eventually could. The next morning passed without incident. Amanda worked another exhausting shift. She attended class online during lunch. She picked Ethan up after school. Life continued moving exactly as it always had. Until Thursday evening. Amanda was washing dishes when she heard something fall in the living room. The sound wasn't loud. Just enough to make her stop. She hurried around the corner. Rosa was standing beside the sofa. One hand gripped the armrest, the other pressed firmly against the left side of her chest. A ceramic teacup lay shattered across the floor. For the first time in years, Amanda saw fear in her mother's eyes. The shattered teacup lay scattered across the hardwood floor, but Amanda barely noticed it. She was already at her mother's side. Mom. Rosa didn't answer immediately. Her breathing had become shallow. One hand clutched the edge of the sofa so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. It's different this time, she whispered. Amanda's heart dropped. Rosa had experienced discomfort before, shortness of breath, fatigue, brief episodes of chest pressure. But never like this. Amanda knelt in front of her. Tell me exactly where it hurts. Rosa slowly pressed her palm against the center of her chest. It feels heavy. The word terrified Amanda. Years of working beside nurses had taught her that patients rarely described heart attacks the way television did. There wasn't always screaming. Sometimes there was only one quiet sentence. It feels heavy. Amanda grabbed her mother's wrist. Her pulse was fast. Too fast. Ethan, the 12-year-old, came running from his bedroom. His eyes immediately widened. What happened? I need you to get Grandma's overnight bag. The blue one? Yes. And her medication list. Amanda nodded. The folder by the refrigerator. Ethan didn't ask another question. He simply ran. Amanda looked back at Rosa. We're going to the hospital. No. Mom. It'll pass. Amanda's voice became firmer. No. She helped Rosa into her coat with gentle but hurried movements. Outside rain pounded against the parking lot. The storm had finally arrived. Water streamed down the apartment windows in thick sheets. Lightning flashed somewhere beyond the buildings. Amanda guided Rosa carefully toward the old Corolla. The engine hesitated. Once. Twice. Please, Amanda whispered, turning the key again. The car finally roared to life. She almost cried from relief. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up with the rain as they pulled onto the nearly empty streets. Ethan sat in the back seat, one hand gripping the overnight bag, the other holding his grandmother's hand over the center console. "It's going to be okay, Grandma." Rosa forced a smile. "I know." But Amanda heard the strain in her mother's voice. She pressed harder on the accelerator. Every red light felt personal. Every slow driver felt unbearable. She glanced at the dashboard clock. 9:17 p.m. The emergency department at Memorial Valley Hospital was only 12 minutes away. It felt like an hour. Rain blurred the bright hospital sign as they turned into the emergency entrance. Amanda parked crookedly across two spaces without caring. She jumped out first, opened Rosa's door, and wrapped one arm around her waist. Inside, the emergency department buzzed with controlled chaos. Phones rang, monitors beeped, wheelchairs rolled across polished floors. A toddler cried somewhere near the waiting area. A television mounted in the corner played muted weather coverage of the storm. Amanda hurried to the reception desk. "My mother is having chest pain." The woman behind the glass looked up. "Name?" "Rosa Perez." "Date of birth?" Amanda answered immediately. "Insurance card?" Amanda slid it beneath the window. The receptionist typed without looking up. Several seconds passed. Amanda glanced towards Rosa, who had lowered herself into a chair and was breathing through pursed lips. "Can someone please see her?" "They'll call her shortly. She's having chest pain." "I understand." The receptionist continued typing. A printer spat out several pages. She attached a white label to a clipboard before finally speaking again. "Please complete these forms." Amanda stared at the stack. "There isn't time. We need updated information. My mother needs a doctor." The receptionist pointed toward the triage area. "A nurse will call her name." "How long?" "It depends on patient volume." Amanda swallowed her frustration. This wasn't the receptionist's fault. She was following protocol. A triage nurse appeared moments later. She checked Rosa's blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen level, asked several routine questions. Then she wrapped a blue plastic identification wristband around Rosa's wrist. The click of the clasp echoed strangely in Amanda's ears. The wristband looked so ordinary. Just blue plastic, a barcode, a name, a date of birth. Nothing about it suggested that it might become one of the most important objects Amanda would ever own. The nurse looked at Rosa. "We're going to have you wait in the lobby for now." Amanda blinked. "What?" "We'll bring her back as soon as a room opens." "My mother has heart disease." "I understand." "She's having chest pain." "We understand." Amanda lowered her voice. "Please." The nurse's expression softened. "I really am sorry. But we have multiple trauma patients arriving because of the storm." Amanda looked toward the hallway. She could see stretchers moving quickly between rooms, doctors, respiratory therapists, paramedics soaked from the rain. Everyone looked busy. Nobody looked cruel. Just overwhelmed. She helped Rosa back into the waiting area. The clock now read 9:42. Minutes passed, then 20, then 30. Rosa leaned against Amanda's shoulder. "I'm tired." "I know." "You should sit." "I'm fine." Amanda wasn't. She watched the electronic tracking board. Names appeared, disappeared. Doors opened, doors closed. Several patients who had arrived after them were called inside. One elderly man with obvious breathing difficulties. A teenager with a broken arm. A woman injured in a car accident. Amanda understood triage. She worked in healthcare. She knew emergency medicine wasn't first come, first served, but every minute made her more uneasy. She walked back to the desk. "My mother's pain is getting worse." The charge nurse looked toward Rosa. "I'll let triage know." "Can someone reassess her?" "We will." "When?" "As soon as possible." Amanda returned to her seat. Ethan quietly handed his grandmother a bottle of water. Rosa smiled weakly. "Thank you, sweetheart." A few seats away, another family whispered anxious prayers. Across the room, a construction worker held an ice pack against his bleeding forehead. Everyone here was waiting for something. Relief. Answers. Hope. At exactly 10:18 p.m., a young nurse carrying folded blankets stepped into the waiting room. She couldn't have been older than 30. Her name badge read Emily Carter, RN. She looked around the crowded room before stopping in front of Rosa. "You look cold." Without waiting for permission, Emily gently unfolded a warm blanket across Rosa's shoulders. The older woman sighed softly. "Thank you." Emily smiled. "My grandmother always hated hospital air conditioning." She noticed Amanda standing nearby. "You must be her daughter." Amanda nodded. "I'm Amanda." "I'm Emily." Emily lowered her voice. "I checked your mom's chart." Amanda immediately leaned closer. "Can you help us?" "I don't control room assignments." Amanda's face fell. "But—" Emily reached into a small staff refrigerator near the nurse's station. She returned carrying 2 paper cups. One contained hot coffee. The other held warm tea. "I figured someone hadn't eaten." Amanda stared at her. "You didn't have to do this." Emily smiled gently. "My shift gets easier when people remember they're not alone." Amanda accepted the coffee with trembling hands. It wasn't the drink that nearly brought tears to her eyes. It was the sentence. Not alone. In a room filled with fluorescent lights, exhaustion, fear, and endless waiting, someone had finally seen them. Emily glanced once more toward Rosa. "If anything changes," Amanda answered immediately, "I'll tell someone." Emily nodded. "I promise I'll keep checking." She walked away before Amanda could thank her again. Amanda watched the young nurse disappear behind the swinging doors. She had no way of knowing that this quiet act of kindness, a blanket, a cup of coffee, and one simple sentence would remain in her memory long after almost everything else about that terrible night became blurred by grief. The storm outside grew louder. Inside the emergency room, time kept moving. But help still hadn't come. At 10:47 p.m., Rosa Perez opened her eyes and looked toward the automatic doors leading into the treatment area. "They're busy," she whispered, almost as though she were comforting Amanda instead of herself. Amanda forced a smile. "They'll call you soon." She no longer believed it. Not because she thought the staff didn't care, but because she had spent enough years inside healthcare to recognize what an overwhelmed emergency department looked like. Every hallway seemed occupied. Stretchers lined the corridors. Ambulance radios crackled behind closed doors. Nurses hurried past carrying medications, oxygen tubing, and charts that never seemed to grow any thinner. The system wasn't standing still. It simply wasn't moving fast enough. Rosa shifted uncomfortably beneath the blanket Emily had brought earlier. "The pressure is spreading." Amanda leaned forward immediately. "Where?" "My shoulder." She placed her hand against the left side of her chest before slowly rubbing toward her arm. Amanda's pulse quickened. She stood without another word and hurried back to the nurse's station. The charge nurse was answering 2 phones at once. Amanda waited. 5 seconds, 10, 20. Finally, the nurse looked up. "My mother's pain is worse. I'll let triage know." "Please don't just tell them." The words escaped before Amanda could soften them. "Please come look at her." The nurse studied Amanda's face. Something in her expression changed. She walked quickly into the waiting room. Rosa attempted another reassuring smile. "I'm sorry to bother everyone." "You aren't bothering anyone," the nurse replied. She repeated Rosa's vital signs: blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation. Everything was written down. The nurse frowned slightly. "I'll see if I can get her reassessed." Amanda heard the uncertainty in that sentence. She knew exactly what it meant. There still wasn't a room. The nurse disappeared again. Amanda returned to her seat beside her mother. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. Only the rain spoke now. It hammered against the tall glass windows overlooking the ambulance entrance. The waiting room lights reflected across puddles outside, turning the parking lot into a blur of silver and white. Across from them, a little boy slept across 3 chairs with a dinosaur backpack tucked beneath his head. An elderly couple quietly prayed together. Someone's cell phone vibrated every few minutes. Someone else cried softly in a corner after receiving a phone call. Hospitals had their own soundtrack. Hope, fear, silence. Amanda reached into her purse and pulled out the Sol blue gratitude notebook she carried everywhere. She didn't intend to write. She simply needed something familiar to hold. Rosa noticed. "You forgot today." Amanda looked down. She had. For the first time in years, she hadn't written her 3 blessings. "You can write tomorrow," Rosa said gently. Amanda swallowed. "We're going home tomorrow." "Of course." "You'll sleep in your own bed." "I like my own bed. And tomorrow night you'll complain that my soup needs more salt." Rosa laughed quietly. "It always needs more salt." Amanda smiled through tired eyes. "I knew you'd say that." Ethan looked from one to the other. Neither of them noticed him watching. He quietly leaned against his grandmother's shoulder. "I'll make the soup next time." "You don't even know the recipe," Rosa teased. "I'll ask." "I never wrote it down." "I'll remember." Rosa kissed the top of his head. "Then promise you'll remember the secret ingredient." "What is it?" She smiled. "Patience." Amanda looked away. For reasons she couldn't explain, that word suddenly hurt. Patience. How much more patience could tonight possibly ask of them? At 11:23 p.m., the automatic doors opened again. Emily Carter stepped into the waiting room carrying another stack of blankets. The moment she saw Rosa, she walked directly toward them. "How are you feeling?" Rosa answered honestly. "Worse." Emily's expression immediately tightened. She crouched beside the chair. "What changed?" "The pain is stronger." Emily looked at Amanda. "When did this start?" "Almost 40 minutes ago." Emily stood. "I'll be right back." This time she didn't walk. She hurried. Amanda watched her disappear into the emergency department. Less than a minute later, voices could be heard behind the doors. Not shouting. Urgent. Professional. Emily returned with another nurse. Together, they checked Rosa again. Emily quietly compared the monitor readings with earlier notes. Amanda noticed the concern growing on her face. Emily looked toward the hallway. No rooms, no stretchers available. Every bay remained occupied. Emily bit her lower lip. "I need to speak with the attending physician." She disappeared again. Several minutes passed. Amanda stood because sitting had become impossible. She paced between 2 rows of chairs. Every few seconds she looked toward the hallway. Every few seconds nothing happened. Finally, Emily returned, alone. "I'm sorry." Amanda searched her face. "What did he say?" "We're still waiting for a treatment space." Amanda stared at her. "My mother could be having a heart attack." "I know." "You know?" Emily's eyes glistened. "I know." Amanda lowered her voice. "There has to be something." Emily hesitated, then answered with painful honesty, "If I move another patient without authorization?" She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Amanda understood. Emily wasn't choosing between helping and not helping. She was trapped inside a system that left almost no room for judgment. Amanda nodded slowly. "I know this isn't your fault." Emily looked relieved and heartbroken at the same time. "I'm so sorry." Amanda watched her walk away once more. She realized something then. Compassion alone couldn't save people. Not if the system prevented compassionate people from acting. Midnight came quietly. The television switched from weather coverage to overnight news. Cleaning staff emptied trash cans. Someone restocked the vending machine. Life continued with terrifying normalcy. Then Rosa suddenly inhaled sharply. Amanda spun around. "Mom?" Rosa's face had turned pale, far paler than before. Her breathing became uneven. She pressed both hands against her chest. "It hurts." Amanda was already shouting. "Help!" Heads turned. A security officer rushed over. Emily appeared almost instantly from behind the doors. So did another nurse. They lowered Rosa carefully toward the floor before transferring her onto a stretcher. Emily looked at Amanda. "We're taking her now." The stretcher disappeared through the emergency doors. Amanda grabbed Ethan's hand and followed until another nurse gently stopped them. "I'm sorry. You have to wait here." "No." Amanda's voice broke for the first time that night. "Please." "We'll come get you." The doors closed. Amanda stood staring at them. 1 minute passed, then another, then 5, then 10. No one came. The hallway beyond the doors remained hidden. No voices, no updates, only silence. Amanda kept staring at those doors as though refusing to blink might somehow bring her mother back through them. Then, at 12:19 a.m., Emily Carter stepped into the waiting room. Amanda knew the answer before the young nurse spoke, because Emily wasn't walking. She was carrying Rosa's blue hospital wristband in one trembling hand. Emily Carter stopped a few feet away. The blue wristband trembled between her fingers. Amanda searched the young nurse's face for anything that resembled hope. She found only sorrow. "I'm so sorry," Emily whispered. For a brief, impossible moment, Amanda simply stared at her. The words reached her ears, but her mind refused to translate them. "No," she answered quietly. Emily's eyes filled with tears. They did everything they could once she was brought back. "No." "Amanda." "No." She stepped past Emily and pushed through the double doors. Someone called after her. Another nurse reached for her shoulder. She barely noticed. She found the treatment room because the curtain was still half open. The cardiac monitor had already been switched off. The room, so frantic only minutes earlier, had become unnaturally quiet. Rosa Perez lay peacefully on the narrow hospital bed. The lines had disappeared from her forehead. The pain was gone. Amanda walked slowly toward her mother. She touched Rosa's hand. It was still warm. "Mama?" No answer. Amanda smiled faintly. "This isn't funny." Silence. "You promised we'd go home." Silence. "You said my soup needed more salt." Nothing. Amanda rested her forehead against her mother's hand. Her shoulders shook, but no sound escaped. The grief came without screaming, without collapsing, without anger. Only a deep, unbearable stillness. Behind her, Emily quietly entered the room. She didn't interrupt. She simply stood there. Several moments later, Ethan appeared beside Amanda. Someone must have allowed him through. He looked at his grandmother, then at his mother. He understood immediately. Children often recognized truths adults still tried to deny. He walked to Amanda and wrapped both arms around her waist. Amanda finally broke. Not into loud sobs, into quiet ones, the kind that seemed to come from somewhere much deeper than tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered to Rosa. "I'm so sorry." Emily stepped closer. "You don't have anything to apologize for." Amanda didn't look up. "I should have brought her sooner." Emily shook her head. "You brought her as soon as you knew." "I should have made someone listen." "You tried." "I should have." Her voice disappeared. Emily knelt beside her. "I reviewed the timeline." Amanda slowly lifted her head. Emily continued softly. "You did everything a daughter could have done." Amanda wanted to believe her. She couldn't. Not tonight. A physician entered the room a few minutes later. Dr. Richard Coleman. He removed his glasses before speaking. "Miss Perez, Amanda stood. Her face was calm now. Too calm. "What time?" He glanced at the chart. 12:11 a.m. Amanda nodded once. "Was it a heart attack?" "Yes." She closed her eyes briefly. "When?" "The exact moment." "No," she interrupted him. "When did it begin?" Dr. Coleman hesitated. "We can't know with certainty. But based on her symptoms..." Amanda waited. "Likely much earlier." Neither of them spoke. Amanda already knew. She had known before asking. She had simply needed to hear someone else admit it. Dr. Coleman lowered his eyes. "I'm very sorry for your loss." Amanda looked at him for several seconds. She expected anger. She expected herself to shout. Instead, she asked one quiet question. "How long was she waiting?" The physician answered honestly. "About 2 hours and 29 minutes. Amanda nodded. Then she thanked him. The words surprised everyone in the room. "So many people worked hard tonight," she said quietly. "I know." Dr. Coleman looked confused. Amanda continued. "I also know my mother waited too long." He opened his mouth, closed it again. There was nothing to say. Because both things were true. The staff had worked tirelessly. The system had still failed. A volunteer from the hospital chapel offered to call a pastor. Amanda politely declined. Instead, she asked for 5 more minutes alone. Emily closed the curtain before leaving. Only Amanda, Ethan, and Rosa remained. Amanda gently brushed a strand of gray hair away from her mother's face. "You always told me kindness costs less than regret." Her voice cracked. "I understand now." Ethan stood silently beside her. After several moments, he reached into Rosa's coat pocket. "I think Grandma would want you to have this." He handed Amanda a folded grocery receipt. On the back, written in Rosa's careful handwriting, were 4 simple words. "Be kind anyway." Amanda stared at them until the ink blurred. She folded the receipt carefully and slipped it into her wallet. It would stay there for years. Eventually, a hospital attendant arrived with Rosa's personal belongings: a purse, reading glasses, medication bottles, a cardigan, and the blue hospital wristband that had been cut from her wrist. Emily held it out gently. "We usually dispose of these." Amanda reached for it. "I'd like to keep it." Emily nodded. "Of course." Amanda turned the thin strip of plastic over in her hands. Rosa Perez. Date of birth? Medical record number. Barcode. So little information. Nothing about Rosa's laugh. Nothing about her cinnamon oatmeal. Nothing about the way she called Ethan "my little professor." Nothing about how she always hummed while folding laundry. Nothing about how she had worked 32 years cleaning office buildings so Amanda could become the first person in their family to attend college. Everything that made Rosa a person had disappeared behind one printed barcode. Amanda slipped the wristband into her wallet beside the folded receipt. The 2 pieces of paper rested together. Be kind anyway. A blue wristband. She had no idea that one day both would sit inside a glass frame in her office. Outside the treatment room, the storm had finally begun to weaken. Rain still fell, but more gently now. Amanda signed the required paperwork with a hand that barely felt connected to her body. Release forms, property forms, funeral home information, every signature felt impossible. As they walked through the emergency department toward the exit, several nurses quietly stopped what they were doing. Some lowered their heads. Others whispered condolences. Emily stood near the doorway. "I wish I could have done more." Amanda looked at her for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and hugged the young nurse. Emily froze, then hugged her back. "You already did," Amanda whispered. Emily frowned. "I brought you coffee." "You reminded me we weren't invisible." Emily couldn't hold back her tears anymore. Amanda released her. "Don't lose that part of yourself." "I won't." You promise?" "I promise." Amanda nodded. Outside, the cold night air hit her face. The hospital entrance glowed behind her. Ambulances continued arriving. Patients continued walking through the sliding doors. Life inside Memorial Valley Hospital had already moved on to the next emergency, but Amanda's life had split into two parts: everything before tonight, everything after. She looked once more at the building, not with hatred, not even with bitterness, only with a question that refused to leave her heart. How many other families had walked out of these doors carrying silence instead of the people they loved? She held Ethan's hand tightly as they walked toward the aging Corolla. Halfway there, Ethan quietly asked the question neither of them had wanted to say aloud. "What do we do now, Mom?" Amanda looked at the hospital one last time before opening the car door. She didn't have an answer. Not yet. But somewhere beneath the grief, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the unbearable emptiness, a promise had already begun to take shape. If she survived this pain, she would spend the rest of her life making sure waiting never stole another family from the people who loved them. The apartment felt impossibly quiet after Rosa was gone. For the first 3 mornings, Amanda still woke at 4:45 a.m. The alarm vibrated. She reached automatically toward the kitchen, expecting to hear the scrape of her mother's slippers across the floor, or the familiar sound of water filling the old tea kettle. Instead, there was only silence. She stood in the doorway of Rosa's bedroom for several minutes every morning. The bed was neatly made. The lavender cardigan still hung on the back of the chair. A pair of reading glasses rested beside an unfinished crossword puzzle. Amanda couldn't bring herself to move anything. It felt as though changing the room meant admitting Rosa would never need it again. She wasn't ready. The funeral took place on a gray Saturday beneath low Pennsylvania skies. It wasn't large. There were no expensive flower arrangements or long processions of black cars. Most of the people who attended were ordinary men and women whose lives had crossed Rosa's in quiet ways. A retired school custodian, a cashier from the neighborhood grocery store, 2 women who had cleaned office buildings alongside Rosa nearly 20 years earlier. Several nurses from Evergreen Care Center came after finishing overnight shifts, still wearing their navy blue scrubs beneath dark coats. Emily Carter stood quietly in the last row. She hadn't been scheduled to work that day. She came anyway. Amanda noticed her only after the service had ended. Emily hesitated before approaching. "I wasn't sure if I should be here." Amanda looked toward the small wooden casket. "My mother believed no kindness was ever too small." Emily lowered her eyes. "I keep thinking about that night." "So do I. I've replayed it every day." Amanda nodded. "I know." Emily looked surprised. "You know, I've done the same thing." Neither woman tried to comfort the other with empty words. Some grief could only be shared. It couldn't be fixed. After everyone left, Amanda and Ethan remained beside Rosa's grave until evening. The cemetery overlooked the Monongahela River. A cold wind carried the scent of wet grass through rows of simple headstones. Ethan finally spoke. "Grandma would have told us not to stay in the cold." Amanda smiled faintly. "She would have complained that neither of us brought jackets, and then she'd take hers off and give it to us." "Even if she froze." They both laughed softly. It lasted only a few seconds, but it mattered. On Monday morning, Amanda returned to work. Several co-workers hugged her without saying anything. Others simply squeezed her shoulder as they passed. Mrs. Eleanor Watkins, an 89-year-old resident with advanced arthritis, looked up from her wheelchair when Amanda entered the room. "You've been crying." Amanda forced a smile. "I'll be all right." The elderly woman reached for Amanda's hand. "No." She squeezed it gently. "You'll learn to keep living?" Amanda felt tears gathering again. Mrs. Watkins continued. "There is a difference." Amanda had spent years caring for older adults. She often forgot how much wisdom quietly surrounded her. Life at Evergreen Care Center resumed almost immediately. Residents still needed bathing. Medication carts still rolled through the hallways. Meals were still served at precisely the same times. Loss did not pause the routines of the living. Amanda threw herself into work with even greater determination. She volunteered for difficult assignments, covered extra shifts, stayed late whenever another CNA called in sick. Not because she wanted overtime, because exhaustion left less room for grief. Every evening after Ethan finished his homework, Amanda opened her laptop for class. At first, the lectures felt meaningless. Hospital finance, healthcare policy, leadership ethics. None of it could bring Rosa back. One night, she nearly closed the computer halfway through a discussion about emergency department management. Then she remembered something her professor had said weeks earlier. Every policy eventually reaches a real person. Amanda stared at those words written across the margin of her notebook. For the first time since Rosa died, something shifted inside her. Policies, waiting times, budget decisions, staffing ratios. None of them were abstract anymore. They had become her mother's final hours. She stopped studying merely to earn better grades. Now she studied because somewhere someone else was still waiting in another emergency room. She couldn't save Rosa. Maybe she could save someone she would never meet. 3 months later, Amanda graduated at the top of her class. During the small ceremony, Ethan stood in the front row, wearing the only dress shirt he owned. When Amanda crossed the stage, he applauded louder than anyone else. Afterward, he handed her a wrapped package. Inside was a simple leather notebook. The first page already contained handwriting. Not Amanda's. His. 3 things worth fighting for. Amanda looked at him. I thought. He smiled shyly. Grandma always wrote things she was thankful for. Amanda nodded. I remember. I think you'd rather write what you're building now. Amanda hugged him so tightly, he laughed. You've gotten taller. I know. Stop doing that. I can't. A week later, Amanda received an unexpected email from Hope Bridge Health Network. The nonprofit organization had launched several community clinics across western Pennsylvania, focusing on underserved neighborhoods where thousands of patients delayed care because of cost or bureaucracy. They were looking for someone with both frontline healthcare experience and administrative training. Amanda almost ignored the message. She assumed hundreds of applicants would be more qualified. Ethan disagreed. You always tell me not to decide someone else's answer. What? When I don't want to enter competitions? Amanda smiled. I did say that. So stop deciding they'll say no. She submitted the application. 2 interviews followed. The final interview lasted nearly 2 hours. Across the table sat Grace Miller, Hope Bridge's executive director. Instead of asking Amanda about grades or management theories, Grace asked one unexpected question. Tell me about the hardest day you've ever experienced inside a hospital. Amanda remained silent for several seconds. Then she told the truth. She described the waiting room, the rain, the blue wristband, the coffee Emily had brought. The moment she realized compassion could exist inside a broken system yet still fail to save someone. When she finished, Grace didn't immediately ask another question. Instead, she quietly said, You've never blamed one person. Amanda shook her head. I've blamed the system. And what's the difference? Amanda answered without hesitation. Systems teach good people what becomes normal. Grace leaned back thoughtfully. If you were given the authority to change one thing tomorrow, what would it be? Amanda looked out the conference room window before answering. I would stop measuring success only by efficiency. Grace waited. I'd measure it by whether frightened families leave believing someone truly saw them. The room fell silent. Grace closed Amanda's resume. I think, she said softly, That's exactly why we need you. 2 weeks later, Amanda accepted a position as Operations Improvement Manager at Hope Bridge Health Network. It wasn't glamorous. It paid only slightly more than her CNA job. She would still work long hours. She would still have to prove herself every single day, but for the first time she would be helping shape decisions, instead of simply living with them. On her first morning before leaving the apartment, Amanda opened the leather notebook Ethan had given her. Under the title, "3 Things Worth Fighting For," she wrote, "Families should never feel invisible. Compassion deserves authority. Waiting should never cost a life." She slipped the notebook into her bag. Then, almost instinctively, she opened her wallet. Inside rested 2 things she carried everywhere: Rosa's folded grocery receipt and the faded blue hospital wristband. Amanda gently touched both before closing her wallet. "I'll carry you with me," she whispered. Then she walked out the door, unaware that this quiet promise had already begun changing the course of her life. Amanda's first day at Hope Bridge Health Network felt strangely familiar. Not because the building resembled the hospital where she had lost her mother. It didn't. Hope Bridge occupied a renovated brick warehouse on the east side of Pittsburgh. Sunlight poured through oversized windows. Hallways displayed photographs of nurses, medical assistants, receptionists, janitors, and volunteers instead of portraits of executives. Every conference room carried the name of an ordinary person whose quiet service had changed a community. The largest meeting room was called Margaret's Room. Amanda asked who Margaret was. The receptionist smiled. "She cleaned this building every night for 23 years. Amanda stopped walking. "A janitor," the receptionist nodded. "Our founder believed buildings remember kindness better than titles." Amanda smiled. Maybe she had come to the right place. Grace Miller met her in the lobby with 2 cups of coffee. "I remember you prefer it black." Amanda looked surprised. "You remembered?" Grace shrugged. "When someone tells me a small detail, I try not to forget it." The words stayed with Amanda for the rest of the morning. Small details. That was how compassion usually appeared, not through grand speeches, through remembering. Grace spent the next several hours introducing Amanda to department heads. No one seemed interested in impressive resumes. Instead, everyone talked about patients. One physician described redesigning exam rooms because elderly patients struggled with heavy doors. A receptionist proudly explained how they had stopped asking uninsured patients about payment until after treatment. A nurse practitioner showed Amanda a small cabinet filled with children's books. "We discovered anxious kids stop crying sooner when someone reads to them." Amanda quietly wrote everything down. By lunchtime, her notebook already contained 2 full pages. Not policies, ideas. That afternoon, Grace handed Amanda her first assignment. "I want you to visit all 6 community clinics over the next month." "What exactly am I looking for?" Grace smiled. What everyone else stopped noticing. Amanda liked that answer. Her work quickly settled into a rhythm. She visited clinics, watched patient flow, timed waiting periods, interviewed nurses, sat beside receptionists, followed housekeeping staff, observed maintenance workers repairing automatic doors. Most administrators studied reports. Amanda studied people. She noticed things statistics never captured. An elderly veteran who became anxious whenever someone closed an examination room door. A receptionist who quietly bought crackers for diabetic patients, arriving with dangerously low blood sugar. A medical assistant who always knelt before speaking with frightened children instead of towering above them. Tiny decisions, invisible acts. Each one quietly changed someone's day. Amanda filled notebook after notebook. 3 months later, she presented her first improvement proposal. Instead of beginning with graphs, she began with a story. She described an 83-year-old woman who had nearly left without treatment because she couldn't understand the registration forms. Then she showed how a simple redesign of paperwork reduced waiting time for older patients by nearly 20%. The room applauded. Grace smiled proudly. "I knew you'd start with a person," Amanda answered softly. "Every policy reaches someone." Grace recognized the sentence immediately. "You've carried that one for a long time." "I probably always will." 6 months into her new position, Amanda received a call from one of Hope Bridge's neighborhood clinics. Dr. Lisa Monroe sounded worried. "We've got a little girl in respiratory distress." Amanda frowned. "I'm on my way." The clinic was only 15 minutes away. When she arrived, she found controlled urgency rather than panic. A 6-year-old girl sat on her mother's lap, struggling to breathe between rapid, wheezing breaths. The child clutched a faded stuffed rabbit. Her mother looked terrified. Amanda approached quietly. "What's her name?" "Olivia." The mother's voice shook. "I'm Hannah." Amanda knelt beside them. "Has she been seen?" "She's already getting treatment." Amanda looked toward the exam room. Nebulizer therapy had already begun. Good. Then she noticed something else. The mother kept glancing nervously toward the reception desk, as if expecting someone to interrupt. Amanda walked over. "Is everything okay?" The receptionist lowered her voice. "She keeps apologizing because she doesn't have insurance." Amanda's chest tightened. The receptionist continued. "She asked 3 times whether we'd stop treating her daughter if she couldn't pay." Amanda stood perfectly still. For a heartbeat, she wasn't standing inside a neighborhood clinic anymore. She was back in Memorial Valley's waiting room. Rain, plastic chairs, a blue wristband, her mother's tired smile. Amanda slowly walked back toward Hannah. The young mother immediately stood. "I'm so sorry." Amanda looked confused. "For what?" "I know we'll owe money." Amanda gently shook her head. "Your daughter is breathing." "I'll make payments." Amanda smiled softly. "Right now, your only job is to hold Olivia's hand." The woman blinked. "That's it. That's enough." Tears immediately filled Hannah's eyes. "I've never—" Her voice disappeared. Amanda handed her a box of tissues. "We'll discuss paperwork after your little girl is safe." Hannah covered her face with both hands. "Thank you." Amanda looked toward Olivia. The little girl's breathing had already begun slowing as the medication took effect. She squeezed the stuffed rabbit. Amanda smiled. "That's a brave rabbit." Olivia nodded weakly. "His name is Pickles." Amanda laughed quietly. "I've never met a rabbit named Pickles before." "He's brave." "I can tell." For several minutes, Amanda simply sat beside them. No paperwork, no meetings, no reports, just presence. Exactly what Emily Carter had offered Amanda 2 years earlier. Later that afternoon, after Olivia was stable enough to go home, Hannah approached Amanda again. "I don't even know your job." Amanda smiled. "Neither do I some days." They both laughed. "I just know nobody made me feel ashamed." Amanda watched Hannah leave carrying Olivia in her arms. Then she walked into her office and closed the door. For the first time since Rosa died. She cried. Not because she felt broken, because she finally understood something. Hope wasn't created by dramatic rescues. Hope was often built in tiny moments when frightened people realized they still mattered. After several minutes, she opened her wallet. The blue wristband rested exactly where it always had. Amanda held it carefully. The faded plastic had begun curling at one edge. Time had changed it, but not what it meant. She whispered the same sentence she had whispered dozens of times before. "I couldn't save you." Then, after a long silence, she added something new. "But maybe because of you, someone else's mother gets to go home." She carefully placed the wristband back into her wallet. When she returned to the hallway, Grace Miller was waiting outside. I heard about the little girl. Amanda nodded. She'll be all right. Grace smiled. So will her mother. Amanda looked at her curiously. Grace continued. Do you know why I hired you? I thought it was because of my operations proposal. Grace shook her head. I hired you because grief made you more compassionate instead of more bitter. Amanda didn't answer. Grace placed a folder into her hands. We've been invited to participate in something much bigger. Amanda looked down. The cover read, Memorial Valley Hospital, Strategic Partnership Review. She froze. The hospital's name seemed to pull all the air from the hallway. Grace watched her carefully. They're in serious financial trouble. Amanda looked up slowly. What does that have to do with us? Grace's expression grew thoughtful. The board is looking for outside leadership. Amanda felt the familiar shape of the blue wristband pressing against her wallet inside her jacket. For the first time in nearly 2 years, the past had begun walking toward her. Amanda carried the Memorial Valley folder home without opening it. It sat on the passenger seat of her aging Corolla throughout the drive, its blue cover visible every time she stopped at a red light. More than once she reached toward it, then pulled her hand back. Some memories demanded preparation. She wasn't sure she had enough. When she arrived home, Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by algebra homework and half-finished sketches for his robotics team. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said. Amanda set the folder on the counter. Maybe I have. Ethan glanced at the hospital logo printed across the front. His expression changed immediately. They called you. Not exactly. You don't have to go back. Amanda looked at him. I haven't decided anything. He nodded but said nothing more. He remembered that hospital, too, not every detail. Children rarely did, but he remembered rain against the windows. He remembered sleeping across 3 waiting room chairs. He remembered his mother's face after the doctor spoke. Some memories never faded, no matter how young you had been. That night, Amanda waited until Ethan had gone to bed before opening the folder. The first page contained a financial summary. Operating losses, declining patient satisfaction, staff turnover, emergency department delays. The numbers stretched across page after page. Yet Amanda barely looked at them. She turned instead to the section titled Community Trust Survey. One sentence seemed to leap from the paper. Families feel processed rather than cared for. Another, communication during emergencies is inconsistent. Another, patients often describe feeling invisible. Amanda slowly closed the folder. Invisible. That word again. It had followed her for 2 years. The following morning, Grace Miller invited Amanda into her office. The walls were lined with photographs instead of awards. Children at vaccination drives, senior citizens at wellness fairs, doctors eating lunch beside janitors. Grace noticed Amanda looking. I've never liked pictures of buildings. Amanda smiled faintly. They don't tell you much. They tell you almost nothing. Grace folded her hands. I assume you read the report. I did. What did you think? Amanda answered honestly. I don't think Memorial Valley has a financial problem. Grace raised an eyebrow. No, I think it has a trust problem. Grace smiled. Keep going. Money follows trust. She leaned forward slightly. If people stop believing you'll care for them eventually, they stop walking through your doors. Grace didn't interrupt. Amanda continued. You can renovate waiting rooms. Buy new equipment. Replace furniture. But if families don't believe they'll be treated like human beings, she looked down at the report. They'll drive somewhere else. Grace leaned back. That's almost exactly what our consultants concluded. Amanda looked surprised. They did. They just needed 300 pages to say it. Amanda laughed for the first time that morning. Grace slid another document across the desk. The board wants outside leadership. Amanda frowned. I've only been here 2 years. I know. There are people with decades of executive experience. There are. They'll never choose me. Grace looked at her steadily. You're still deciding someone else's answer. Amanda blinked. That sounded familiar. Very familiar. Ethan. Grace smiled knowingly. I've met your son. Amanda couldn't help laughing. He got to you too. He did. Grace stood and walked toward the window. Memorial Valley doesn't need another executive who knows how hospitals operate. She turned back. It needs someone who remembers what it feels like to sit in the waiting room. Amanda's smile disappeared. Silence filled the office. Finally, she spoke. I don't know if I can walk back into that building. You don't have to answer today. Grace placed a small envelope on the desk. Take the weekend. Amanda picked it up. Inside was a handwritten note. Not from Grace. From Mark Henderson, chairman of Memorial Valley's board, it read, We've heard remarkable things about your work. If you're willing, we'd like to hear your ideas before we discuss resumes. No promises, just a conversation. Amanda folded the note carefully. A conversation. That sounded less frightening than an interview. Saturday morning, she drove alone to Riverside Park. Whenever life became too noisy, she walked there. The river moved slowly beneath the old steel bridge. Cyclists passed. Children chased ducks near the shoreline. An elderly man played saxophone beneath a pavilion. Amanda sat on a weathered wooden bench overlooking the water. She pulled Rosa's grocery receipt from her wallet. The paper had become soft from years of folding. 4 words remained perfectly readable. Be kind anyway. Amanda whispered them aloud. I've tried. The breeze carried the words away. She then removed the blue hospital wristband. The plastic had faded slightly. The barcode was almost worn away. She turned it over in her hands. I don't know if I'm strong enough. No answer came. Only the sound of water moving over rocks. An older woman walking her golden retriever slowed as she passed. Beautiful morning. Amanda smiled politely. It is. The woman looked toward the river. My husband always said water keeps moving even after storms. She continued walking before Amanda could respond. Amanda watched her disappear down the path. Water keeps moving. That evening, Ethan found her sitting quietly at the kitchen table. The folder remained unopened beside her coffee. You still haven't decided. Amanda shook her head. I'm afraid. Of what? She thought carefully before answering. I'm afraid I'll spend every day remembering. Ethan pulled out the chair across from her. I think you already do. She looked at him. He continued gently. You don't avoid remembering. You carry Grandma's wristband everywhere. Amanda instinctively touched her wallet. I know. So maybe going back isn't about remembering. He hesitated. Maybe it's about changing what happens to the next family. Amanda stared at her son. Sometimes she forgot he was only 14. He had inherited Rosa's gift for seeing straight through complicated emotions. Sunday afternoon, Amanda accepted the invitation. The meeting took place 3 days later inside a downtown office building, rather than at the hospital. Mark Henderson greeted her personally. He was in his early 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that suggested he listened more than he spoke. Miss Perez. Amanda is fine. Only if you call me Mark. They shook hands. The board members expected a polished presentation. Amanda arrived carrying only a notebook. No slideshow, no charts, no consultants. Mark noticed. No presentation. Amanda smiled. I thought we'd have a conversation. He smiled back. I was hoping you'd say that. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. Board members asked about staffing, finances, emergency department efficiency, quality metrics. Amanda answered every question. Then one board member asked, "If you could change only one thing during your first year, what would it be?" The room became quiet. Amanda didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her purse. She removed the faded blue wristband. No one recognized it. She placed it carefully in the center of the table. "This." Several people exchanged confused looks. Amanda finally spoke. "2 years ago, this belonged to my mother." Silent. She died after waiting for emergency care. Nobody interrupted. "I am not showing you this because I want sympathy." She looked around the room. "I'm showing you because every spreadsheet you've given me represents someone's version of this wristband." She rested one hand gently on the plastic band. "If you ever forget that..." Her voice remained calm. No financial recovery plan will save your hospital." No one spoke for several long seconds. Finally, Mark Henderson quietly asked, "Why did you come today?" Amanda looked at the wristband, then back at him. "Because I refuse to let this become someone else's family story." The room fell completely silent. And for the first time since Memorial Valley began searching for new leadership, every person at that table realized they weren't interviewing a candidate. They were listening to the woman who understood exactly what the hospital had forgotten. Amanda drove home in silence. The meeting replayed in her mind with every mile. No one had argued with her. No one had defended the hospital. No one had even tried to explain away what had happened to Rosa. Instead, the board members had listened. Some had lowered their eyes. Others had quietly taken notes. Mark Henderson had walked her to the elevator himself. Just before the doors closed, he had said one sentence. "I think Memorial Valley has been waiting for someone like you." Amanda wasn't sure whether those words comforted her or frightened her. When she reached home, Ethan was in the living room assembling a small robot for an upcoming competition. He looked up the moment she entered. "How did it go?" Amanda hung her coat on the rack. "I don't know." "You don't know?" They asked questions. And I answered. And they listened. Ethan smiled. "That's a good start?" Amanda laughed softly. "It is." She walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Leftover vegetable soup, milk, eggs, half a loaf of bread. Nothing fancy. She heated the soup exactly the way Rosa used to. Without thinking, she reached toward the spice cabinet. Salt. Then she stopped. A memory surfaced. "It always needs more salt." Amanda smiled sadly. She added only a tiny pinch. Some habits never disappeared. Later that evening, while Ethan finished homework, Amanda sat alone with Rosa's old gratitude notebook. She hadn't written in it for months. The pages after Rosa's passing remained almost blank. She slowly opened to a clean page. Instead of writing 3 blessings, she found herself writing one question. What does healing actually look like? She stared at the sentence for several minutes. Healing wasn't forgetting. It wasn't pretending the pain had never happened. It wasn't winning. Then what was it her phone vibrated? A new email. From Mark Henderson. The subject line read, "May we meet again." Amanda opened it. It was short. Amanda. Thank you for speaking honestly today. Several board members have asked to continue our conversation. No decisions have been made, but we'd like you to visit Memorial Valley next week, not as a candidate, but simply to observe. Walk wherever you wish. Speak with anyone you wish. Ask any question. Sometimes a building tells its own story. Mark Amanda read the message twice, then closed the laptop without replying. She wasn't ready. The next morning, Grace Miller called. "I assume you've seen Mark's email." "I have." "What are you thinking?" Amanda answered honestly. "I'm trying to figure out whether walking back into that hospital will help me heal." She paused. or reopen everything. Grace didn't respond immediately. Finally, she said, "Can I tell you something I learned after my husband died?" Amanda hadn't known Grace was widowed. "Of course. I avoided the road where the accident happened for almost 3 years." Amanda listened quietly. "One day, my daughter asked me a question." "What did she ask?" Grace smiled softly. "She asked whether avoiding the road had brought her father back." Amanda closed her eyes. "It hadn't," Grace continued. "Sometimes places don't keep us trapped. We keep ourselves trapped by refusing to return." After hanging up, Amanda sat at the kitchen table for a long time. She looked toward Rosa's empty chair, then at the folded grocery receipt inside her wallet. "Be kind anyway." She whispered the words aloud. "What would you tell me?" The apartment remained silent, but somehow she already knew the answer: go. Not because they deserve it, because someone else does. 3 days later, Amanda parked outside Memorial Valley Hospital. She hadn't stood in that parking lot since the night Rosa died. Nothing looked different. The same brick entrance, the same emergency sign, the same rows of windows reflecting the morning sky. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel. She couldn't move. Not yet. She noticed something in the passenger seat. The blue wristband. She had brought it without realizing. Amanda picked it up, held it for a moment, then slipped it into her coat pocket. "If I'm doing this," she whispered, "I'm bringing you with me." The sliding glass doors opened with the same quiet, mechanical sound she remembered. The smell hit her immediately. Disinfectant, coffee, floor polish. Hospitals always smelled almost identical. A volunteer greeted her. "Good morning." Amanda smiled politely. "Good morning." No one recognized her. Not here. Not yet. Mark Henderson met her near the main lobby. "I'm glad you came." Amanda nodded. "I almost didn't." "I expected that." He handed her a visitor badge. "No schedule. No presentations. No committee meetings. Just walk." Amanda clipped the badge to her jacket. Together, they began moving through the hospital. The surgical floor looked busy. The maternity ward was filled with newborn photographs. The rehabilitation unit echoed with physical therapists encouraging patients to take one more step. Amanda noticed small things: housekeepers greeting patients by name, maintenance workers stopping to help visitors find elevators, a cafeteria employee carrying an extra tray for an elderly man with a walker. Kindness still existed here, just as it had 2 years ago. The problem had never been that compassionate people were missing. The problem was that compassion depended too much on individuals instead of the system itself. Eventually, they reached the emergency department. Amanda slowed. Her heartbeat quickened. The waiting room had new chairs, fresh paint, different artwork, but the layout remained almost unchanged. Her eyes drifted toward one corner, the exact place where Rosa had sat beneath Emily's blanket. The chair was occupied now by a young father holding a sleeping toddler. Amanda stood perfectly still. Mark watched quietly. "You don't have to stay." Amanda shook her head. "I do." She walked into the waiting room. Every step carried another memory. The vending machines, the television, the reception window, the automatic doors, even the clock. It had been replaced. Yet she still remembered the old one's position. Time behaved strangely inside places marked by grief. Minutes disappeared. Years returned. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "Amanda." She turned. Emily Carter stood only a few feet away. She looked older now, more confident. But Amanda recognized her immediately. Emily's eyes widened. For a second, neither woman spoke. Then Emily crossed the room and embraced her without hesitation. I can't believe you're here. Amanda hugged her back. It's good to see you. Emily stepped back, tears already forming. I've thought about you so many times. So have I. Emily glanced toward Mark, then back to Amanda. Are you? She hesitated. Visiting. Amanda looked around the emergency department one more time, then answered with complete honesty. I don't know yet. Emily smiled gently. I think you do. Amanda didn't reply, because deep inside, she was beginning to realize the decision had already been made long before she walked through those doors. It had started the night she slipped a faded blue wristband into her wallet. She simply hadn't been ready to admit it. Amanda stood in the middle of the emergency department for several seconds after Emily walked away to answer a call light. Everything around her continued, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. A paramedic wheeled in a middle-aged man holding his injured wrist. A volunteer offered bottled water to an elderly couple. A housekeeper quietly mopped rainwater near the entrance. Life inside Memorial Valley never stopped. It couldn't. Mark Henderson watched Amanda without interrupting. Finally, he asked, Would you like to see the administrative offices? Amanda looked toward the treatment area instead. Not yet. Where would you like to go? She answered without hesitation. I want to follow a patient. Mark seemed surprised. A patient? I've seen enough executive offices. He smiled. I thought you might say that. Within minutes, they were accompanying Sandra Lewis, a 74-year-old woman who had arrived after slipping on wet concrete outside her apartment. She had fractured her wrist. Nothing life-threatening. Still painful. Amanda didn't speak much. She simply observed. The registration clerk smiled and introduced herself by name. The triage nurse explained every step before touching the patient. A radiology technician apologized for a 15-minute delay. Sandra thanked each person as though they had done something extraordinary. Amanda quietly timed every transition in a small notebook. Arrival, registration, triage, imaging, treatment, discharge. She wasn't measuring efficiency alone. She was measuring uncertainty. How long did patients go without hearing someone's voice? How often were they told what came next? How many minutes passed before someone simply acknowledged their fear? When Sandra finally left with her arm in a cast, Amanda looked at Mark. She's going to tell people this was a good hospital. Mark nodded. I hope so. No, Amanda corrected him gently. You don't have to hope. He looked curious. You can predict it. How? Because every person she met made her feel seen. Mark remained silent. Amanda continued walking. Near the nurse's station, she noticed a whiteboard listing patient wait times. Some entries simply read, delayed. No explanation. She pointed toward it. Who updates families when delays happen? Mark frowned. I assume the charge nurse. Amanda looked around. The charge nurse was coordinating ambulance arrivals while answering 2 telephones. She barely had time to breathe. Amanda quietly wrote another note. No dedicated communication role. Further down the hallway, she stopped outside the staff break room. The door stood open. Several nurses sat in exhausted silence eating microwaved lunches. No one laughed. No one looked rested. Emily walked in carrying a cup of coffee. She greeted everyone individually before sitting down. One nurse sighed. We're already 20 beds over capacity. Another rubbed his temples. I've still got charting from 3 hours ago. Amanda listened without entering. After several moments, she stepped away. Mark followed. You didn't want to interrupt? Amanda shook her head. They weren't complaining. No. They were surviving. The words lingered between them. Later that morning, Amanda visited environmental services. The housekeeping supervisor looked surprised to see a visitor. Can I help you? Amanda smiled. I'd like to understand your work. The supervisor blinked. No administrator has ever asked me that. Amanda spent almost 40 minutes following housekeeping staff. She watched them sanitize operating rooms, comfort grieving families, find lost hearing aids, locate missing blankets, guide confused visitors. One elderly employee named Harold quietly told her, "People think we clean floors." He smiled. "Mostly we clean fear." Amanda wrote the sentence down immediately. Clean fear. It perfectly described something she had never been able to express. Around noon, Mark suggested lunch in the executive dining room. Amanda declined. "Where do the night shift nurses eat?" Mark laughed. "I have no idea." "Then let's find out." They ended up in a small cafeteria tucked behind the loading dock. The food was simple: soup, sandwiches, fruit, plastic trays. Amanda stood in line behind transport aides, dietary workers, and respiratory therapists. Nobody recognized her. She liked that. While carrying her tray, she noticed an elderly volunteer struggling to balance 2 bowls of soup. Without thinking, Amanda reached for one. "I've got it." The volunteer smiled. "Thank you." "It's no trouble." As they walked together, the volunteer asked, "Are you new here?" Amanda hesitated. "Maybe. I've volunteered 22 years. He pointed toward the emergency department. "I've learned something." "What?" "The people who change hospitals usually don't wear white coats." Amanda looked at him. "What do you mean?" "They're the ones who decide whether kindness has enough time." Amanda felt goosebumps. After lunch, Mark excused himself for another meeting. "I'll leave you to explore." Amanda wandered alone through the building. Eventually, she found herself standing outside Conference Room B. The door was slightly open. Inside, Dr. Richard Coleman was leading a quality review meeting. Amanda recognized him instantly. He looked older than she remembered. His hair had become noticeably grayer. The confidence she remembered had softened into visible fatigue. She almost walked away. Instead, she knocked gently. Everyone looked up. Dr. Coleman froze. Recognition spread across his face almost immediately. "Amanda!" The room fell silent. No one else understood. He did. Amanda stepped inside. "I'm sorry to interrupt." He stood slowly. "I didn't know you were here." "I know." The meeting participants quietly excused themselves without being asked. Within a minute, only Amanda and Dr. Coleman remained. Neither spoke at first. Finally, he broke the silence. "I've wanted to find you." Amanda looked at him calmly. "I wasn't hard to find." "No." He nodded. "I suppose you weren't." He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I've rehearsed this conversation for 2 years." Amanda waited. "I don't expect forgiveness." "I know. I've replayed that night more times than I can count." Amanda said nothing. He continued. "I told myself we followed protocol." His voice became quieter. Then I realized something. "What?" "Protocol isn't supposed to replace judgment." Amanda looked directly at him. For the first time, she didn't see the physician from the worst night of her life. She saw a tired man carrying his own version of regret. Dr. Coleman walked towards the window. "I almost resigned." Amanda frowned slightly. "What stopped you?" He looked back. "I decided leaving wouldn't help the next patient." Those words surprised her. He continued. "So I stayed. I pushed for changes. Not enough. But some." He looked down. It never felt like enough. Amanda quietly reached into her pocket. She removed the blue wristband. Dr. Coleman's eyes immediately filled with tears. "You kept it." "I did." He swallowed hard. "I remember clipping it off your mother's wrist." Amanda nodded. "I remember too." Silence settled over the room once again. Finally, Dr. Coleman whispered, "I'm sorry." Not as a physician, not as an administrator, simply as one human being speaking to another. Amanda believed him. She had believed him the moment he said it, but belief and healing were not always the same thing. She carefully placed the wristband back into her pocket. "I'm not here because of what happened 2 years ago." He looked confused. "I'm here because of what happens tomorrow." For the first time that afternoon, Dr. Richard Coleman smiled. Only slightly. But it was enough for Amanda to realize something important. Real change wasn't built by humiliating people who had made mistakes. It was built by giving honest people the courage to admit them, and then helping them become better. When Amanda finally left the conference room, Mark Henderson was waiting in the hallway. "You've been in there almost an hour." Amanda nodded. "I know." He searched her face. "How did it go?" Amanda looked once more toward the emergency department, then quietly answered, "Better than I expected." Far better. Because for the first time since Rosa died, Amanda no longer felt like she was walking through the building where she had lost her mother. She was beginning to see the place where her mother's story might save countless strangers. Amanda left Memorial Valley that afternoon carrying far less anger than she had brought with her. The rain had returned, though only as a light drizzle. Tiny drops collected across the windshield of her Corolla while she sat motionless in the driver's seat. She didn't start the engine. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and took out the faded blue wristband. For the first time in 2 years, she no longer saw only the night her mother had died. She also saw Emily carrying a warm blanket. She saw the frightened receptionist who had been following procedures she didn't create. She saw exhausted nurses trying to stretch impossible resources. She saw Dr. Coleman admitting without excuses that protocol had become more important than judgment. None of those memories erased Rosa's death, but together they revealed something she had refused to see before. No single person had failed her mother. An entire culture had. Amanda slipped the wristband back into her wallet. This time it felt lighter. The next morning, Mark Henderson called. "The board met last night." Amanda took a slow breath. "And they'd like to offer you the position?" She closed her eyes. "Chief Executive Officer." The words should have felt triumphant. Instead, they felt impossibly heavy. "I need time." "You have all weekend." "No." Amanda smiled faintly. "I mean, I need time to think before I answer." "I understand." Mark paused. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I've chaired hospital boards for almost 20 years. Amanda listened quietly. "I've interviewed brilliant physicians, exceptional financial executives, national healthcare consultants." He paused again. "You are the only candidate who spent more time talking to housekeepers than board members." Amanda laughed softly. "I learned more from them." "I know. And that's exactly why we're asking." After the call ended, Amanda drove to Hope Bridge. Grace Miller was waiting outside her office before Amanda even reached the hallway. "They called." "They did?" Grace smiled, and "I haven't answered." Grace nodded as though she had expected exactly that. "Come with me." They walked downstairs instead of toward the executive offices, through another hallway, past the outpatient clinic, into a modest conference room where about 20 newly hired employees sat waiting for orientation. Receptionists, medical assistants, custodians, nursing assistants, maintenance workers. Grace whispered, "I want you to watch." She stepped to the front of the room. "Before we begin today's orientation, I'd like everyone to meet Amanda Perez." Polite applause filled the room. Grace continued. 2 years ago, Amanda joined Hope Bridge because she believed healthcare could become kinder. She smiled toward Amanda. "I'd like her to tell you why she stayed." Amanda hadn't prepared anything. She slowly walked to the front. 20 faces looked back at her, expecting a speech. Instead, Amanda reached into her wallet. She placed the blue wristband on the table. The room became silent. "This belonged to my mother." No one moved. "She died waiting for emergency care." Several employees lowered their eyes. Amanda continued quietly. "I carried this because I thought it represented the worst night of my life." She looked around the room. "I was wrong." Everyone listened. "It represents the reason I kept working." She picked up the wristband. "Every patient who walks through your doors is someone's whole world. They aren't room numbers. They aren't insurance cards. They aren't delays. They aren't productivity reports. They're somebody's mother, somebody's husband, somebody's little girl." She looked toward a young receptionist sitting in the front row. "The first smile they receive may belong to you." Then toward a janitor. "The clean hallway they walk through may be because of you." Toward a nursing assistant. "The hand that calms them may be yours." Amanda's voice grew steadier. "Never believe your kindness is too small. You may become the only part of someone's worst day that they remember with gratitude." Silence filled the room. Then one young maintenance technician quietly wiped tears from his eyes. Grace stepped forward. "I've watched Amanda transform every department she's entered." She smiled. But today she reminded us why. When the orientation ended, several employees approached Amanda one by one. A receptionist admitted she had never realized how much first impressions mattered. A housekeeping employee thanked her for recognizing invisible work. A medical assistant said she planned to introduce herself by name to every patient from now on. Amanda drove home thinking about those conversations. That evening, Ethan found her standing at the kitchen window. "You still haven't answered?" She smiled. "No." He leaned against the counter. "What are you afraid of now?" Amanda considered the question. "I'm afraid I'll fail." "You might?" She laughed. "Thanks." "I'm serious." He shrugged. "You might. But if you don't try," he smiled, "someone else definitely won't do it the way you would." Amanda looked at him. "When did you become wiser than me?" He grinned. "I had good teachers." He glanced toward Rosa's empty chair. "We both did." Saturday morning, Amanda returned to Memorial Valley one final time before making her decision. This visit wasn't scheduled. She wanted to see the hospital exactly as it operated on an ordinary weekend. No board members, no tours, no prepared presentations, only reality. As she entered the emergency department, she immediately noticed Emily helping an elderly man adjust his hearing aids before asking any medical questions. Amanda smiled. Small things. A frightened little boy cried while waiting for stitches. Emily crouched beside him. "What superhero do you like?" "Spider-Man." Emily pulled a Spider-Man sticker from her pocket. "Then Spider-Man needs brave helpers." Within seconds, the child stopped crying. Again. Small things. Amanda wandered quietly through the waiting room. No one recognized her. She preferred it that way. Near the coffee station, she overheard two visitors talking. "I heard this hospital used to be terrible." The other nodded. "My neighbor almost refused to come here." The first woman looked around. "It feels different now." Amanda stood perfectly still. Different. Not perfect. Different. That single word filled her with hope. As she turned toward the exit, Emily caught sight of her. "I didn't expect to see you again." "I wanted one more look." Emily hesitated. "Have you decided?" Amanda looked around the waiting room one last time. The little boy now laughed while showing off his Spider-Man sticker. The elderly man thanked a volunteer for helping him find the restroom. A nurse apologized to a family for a delay before they even had time to complain. The building still had flaws, many of them, but it also had people worth fighting beside. Amanda looked back at Emily, then smiled. Yes. Emily's eyes brightened. You accepted? Amanda nodded slowly. I think, she paused, it's time to go home. Emily understood exactly what she meant, because Memorial Valley was no longer only the place where Amanda had lost someone she loved. It had become the place where Rosa's memory would quietly teach hundreds of strangers how to care for people they had never met. Amanda Perez officially became Chief Executive Officer of Memorial Valley Hospital on the first Monday of October. There were no balloons, no television cameras, no ribbon-cutting ceremony. She had specifically requested that all of it be canceled. If we're celebrating, she told Mark Henderson, I'd rather celebrate after patients notice a difference. Mark had smiled. I thought you'd say that. At precisely 7:00 a.m., Amanda walked through the hospital's front entrance carrying the same brown leather folder she had brought to her interview. Inside were no grand strategic plans, only a yellow legal pad filled with handwritten notes collected over months of observation. Each page carried short sentences. Introduce yourself before asking questions. Explain delays every 15 minutes. No patient should wonder whether they have been forgotten. Housekeepers deserve morning briefings too. Waiting without information feels longer than waiting with honesty. Simple ideas. None required millions of dollars. All required intention. The executive conference room was already full when Amanda arrived. Department directors, physician leaders, nursing supervisors, finance officers, human resources, environmental services, dietary management. For the first time in Memorial Valley's history, the housekeeping director and cafeteria manager had also been invited. Several executives exchanged confused looks. Amanda noticed. She said nothing. Instead, she waited until everyone had taken a seat. Then she stood. Good morning. The room answered quietly. Good morning. Amanda looked around the table. I know many of you expected today's meeting to begin with financial projections. Several people nodded. It won't. She reached into her folder. Not for spreadsheets, for the faded blue wristband. Without saying a word, she placed it in the center of the table. Several people recognized it immediately. Others looked confused. Amanda spoke calmly. This belonged to my mother? No one interrupted. 2 years ago, she died after waiting in our emergency department. The room remained completely silent. Amanda continued before anyone could apologize. I'm not sharing this to make anyone feel guilty. She looked around the room. Guilt changes very little. Responsibility changes everything. Those words settled heavily over the table. She continued. I've spent the last several months walking through every department. I've spoken with physicians, nurses, receptionists, transport teams, maintenance workers, housekeepers, cafeteria employees. I learned something important. She paused. This hospital does not have a kindness problem. Several people looked surprised. It has a consistency problem. She walked toward the whiteboard. Patients receive extraordinary compassion. She wrote the word sometimes. Depending on who happens to be working. She underlined it. Healthcare should never depend on luck. No one argued. Amanda turned back. My goal isn't to create more compassionate employees. She smiled gently. You already have them. My goal is to build systems that make compassion easier instead of harder. Dr. Richard Coleman slowly nodded. Amanda noticed. So today, we're beginning with 5 changes. She wrote them one by one. Every patient receives an explanation of what happens next. Every delayed patient receives an update at least every 15 minutes. Every employee introduces themselves by name. Emergency treatment decisions are never delayed by avoidable administrative paperwork. Every department, including non-clinical staff, participates in patient experience training. The finance director raised his hand. Some of these changes will require additional staffing. Amanda nodded. They will. Our operating budget is already strained. I know. He hesitated. How do we pay for it? Amanda answered without looking at her notes. We stopped paying for preventable complaints. The room became quiet. She continued. When people trust hospitals, they return. They recommend us. They comply with treatment. They recover better. She smiled. Compassion isn't separate from financial health. It's part of it. Mark Henderson quietly leaned back in his chair. He looked almost relieved. After the meeting ended, Amanda surprised everyone again. Instead of remaining in the executive suite, she walked directly to environmental services. Harold, the veteran housekeeper she had met months earlier, nearly dropped his clipboard when he saw her. Ma'am, Amanda smiled. Can I borrow 15 minutes? He blinked. From me? From your team. Within minutes, every available housekeeper gathered in a storage room. Amanda looked around. I wanted my first visit today to be here. Several employees exchanged confused glances. She continued. When patients remember hospitals, they remember clean rooms. They remember quiet hallways. They remember feeling safe. She smiled warmly. You create those feelings. Harold slowly shook his head. In 31 years, he laughed softly. No CEO has ever said that to us. Amanda answered simply. Then they're 31 years late. The room erupted into applause. Word spread through the hospital faster than Amanda expected. The new CEO had eaten breakfast in the employee cafeteria. She had thanked the overnight janitors before greeting department chiefs. She knew maintenance workers by name. She carried no entourage. She waited in line for coffee like everyone else. Some employees found it refreshing. Others assumed it was temporary. We'll see how long this lasts, one physician quietly remarked. Amanda overheard him. She smiled. So will I. That afternoon, she visited the emergency department, not to inspect, to observe. The waiting room looked busy but calm. Emily Carter approached. You picked a busy day. Amanda glanced at the tracking board. When isn't it busy? Emily laughed. Fair point. Amanda noticed an elderly man sitting alone near the entrance. He looked anxious. Every few minutes he checked the hallway, then looked down again. Amanda walked over. Hello? The man looked up. I'm Amanda. He nodded politely. Frank, who are you waiting with? My wife. How long has she been inside? I don't know. Amanda checked her watch. When did someone last update you? He thought carefully. I'm not sure. Amanda quietly stood. I'll be right back. 5 minutes later, she returned with Emily. Emily knelt beside Frank. Your wife is having a CT scan. It should be about another 20 minutes. After that, the physician will speak with both of you. Frank's shoulders visibly relaxed. Thank you. As they walked away, Emily smiled. He wasn't upset. Amanda nodded. He was scared. There's a difference. Emily looked thoughtful. There really is. Late that afternoon, Amanda received an unexpected message. Dr. Coleman wanted to see her. She found him reviewing patient charts. I've drafted something. He handed her several pages. It was a proposal. Mandatory emergency reassessment protocols for patients reporting worsening chest pain while waiting. Amanda slowly looked up. "This was your idea," he nodded. "I should have written it 2 years ago." Amanda read the final paragraph. Every patient deserves another chance to be heard before their condition decides for them. She closed the folder. Without saying a word, she extended her hand. Dr. Coleman shook it. Neither mentioned Rosa. They didn't need to. Both understood exactly why those pages existed. As Amanda left his office, she glanced through the emergency department one more time. The hospital wasn't transformed. Not yet. Problems remained. Budgets were still tight. Staffing shortages still existed. Patients still waited. But something invisible had already begun changing. People were asking one another a new question. Not, "What's the policy?" but, "What does this patient need right now?" Amanda smiled quietly. She knew culture never changed in a single meeting. It changed through thousands of ordinary decisions repeated every day. And Memorial Valley had just begun making its first. Nearly 11 months passed before Amanda truly understood how much Memorial Valley had changed. Transformation had not arrived in dramatic headlines or glowing magazine articles. It came quietly, almost invisibly, through thousands of ordinary moments. Receptionists now stood to greet frightened families instead of speaking through glass without looking up. Every employee, from surgeons to environmental services, wore a badge beneath their name that read, "Ask me, I'll help." Volunteers walked through the emergency waiting room every 15 minutes, offering blankets, water phone chargers, and simple updates. Patients still waited. Emergency medicine could never promise otherwise. But no one waited alone. Amanda refused to judge success by quarterly reports alone. Every Friday morning, she spent 2 hours walking through the hospital without announcing herself. No assistants, no cameras, no speeches, just observation. She watched visitors trying to find elevators. She listened to conversations in hallways. She sat quietly in waiting rooms, pretending to read while noticing what families actually experienced. Some executives called it unusual. Amanda called it leadership. One rainy Thursday evening in late September, almost exactly 3 years after Rosa's final visit, Amanda had nearly finished her rounds when thunder rolled across the city. Heavy rain began pounding against the emergency department windows. For just a moment, the sound transported her back to another storm, another waiting room, another impossible night. She stopped walking. Emily Carter noticed immediately. "You okay?" Amanda nodded slowly. "Storms still remember." Emily understood without needing further explanation. At that moment, the automatic doors burst open. A young woman stumbled inside, carrying a boy who couldn't have been older than 8. The child gasped desperately for air. His tiny chest struggled with every breath. Rainwater dripped from both of them onto the polished floor. "My son can't breathe." The mother sounded terrified. Within seconds, 3 people were moving, not running in panic, running with purpose. A triage nurse met them halfway across the lobby. A respiratory therapist rolled emergency equipment toward them. Emily reached the child first. "I'm Emily." She smiled directly at the frightened boy. "What's your name?" Daniel." The answer came between painful breaths. "You're doing great, Daniel." Emily gently placed an oxygen mask over his face. The mother looked around wildly. "I don't have—" She reached desperately into her soaked purse. "My insurance." Emily placed one reassuring hand on the woman's shoulder. "We'll take care of that later." "But right now," Emily smiled gently, "our only job is helping Daniel breathe." Amanda felt something catch in her throat. Those words, almost identical to the ones she herself had spoken to Hannah nearly a year earlier. Kindness had begun echoing through the building. No one asked for payment. No one reached for paperwork. No one told the family to sit down and wait. Within less than 2 minutes, Daniel disappeared behind the treatment doors, surrounded by skilled professionals. His mother remained frozen near the entrance. One volunteer quietly placed a warm blanket around her shoulders. Another handed her bottled water. A registration specialist approached with a clipboard, but instead of asking for insurance, she smiled warmly. "My name is Rebecca. I'm going to stay with you. When your son is stable, we'll complete everything together." The young mother burst into tears. "I've never—" She couldn't finish. Rebecca gently squeezed her hand. "I know." Amanda stood motionless. Emily returned several minutes later. "He'll be okay." The relief on the mother's face was immediate. She covered her mouth with both hands. "Thank God." Amanda slowly walked toward them. The mother looked up. "I'm sorry," Amanda smiled. "You don't need to apologize. I made everyone rush." Amanda shook her head. "That's exactly what emergency teams are here for." The woman laughed nervously through tears. "I don't even know who you are." Amanda hesitated. "I'm Amanda. Do you work here?" "I do." "What do you do?" Emily answered before Amanda could. "She reminds all of us why we came into healthcare." Amanda gave Emily an embarrassed look. The young nurse only smiled. About 30 minutes later, Daniel's breathing had stabilized. His asthma attack was under control. The emergency physician assured his mother that they had arrived just in time. Amanda quietly watched the reunion from the hallway. Daniel smiled weakly as he hugged his mother. I'm okay." "I know, sweetheart." "No." He grinned beneath the oxygen tubing. "I really am." Amanda turned away before either of them noticed the tears filling her eyes. She walked toward the emergency department entrance, where rain continued falling outside. Emily joined her a moment later. "You were thinking about your mom." Amanda nodded. "I was." Emily folded her arms. "I was too." Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Amanda asked, "Do you remember the coffee?" Emily laughed softly. "I almost burned it." "You did?" "It was terrible coffee." Amanda smiled. "It was the best cup I've ever had." Emily looked down. "I still carry blankets into the waiting room." "I know. I don't think I'll ever stop." Amanda gently touched her shoulder. "I hope you never do." Just then, Rebecca, the registration specialist, walked over carrying a clipboard. "I wanted to tell you something." Amanda looked at her. "When I first started here, I asked why we don't discuss payment until after emergency care." She smiled. "They told me it was because our CEO believes Fear shouldn't have to answer financial questions." Amanda blinked. "I've never said it exactly like that." Rebecca laughed. "I know. It's become part of hospital folklore." Emily smiled. "People repeat it to every new employee." Amanda looked around the waiting room. Families still sat in plastic chairs. Children still cried. Phones still rang. Ambulances still arrived. Hospitals would always contain Fear. But Fear no longer walked those halls alone. As Amanda prepared to leave for the evening, Daniel suddenly ran toward her. His breathing had improved enough that he no longer needed the oxygen mask. He stopped in front of her. "My mom says you helped." Amanda knelt. "Lots of people helped." He held out something in his small hand, a Spider-Man sticker. Emily laughed. "I gave him that." Daniel nodded proudly. "I want you to have it." Amanda smiled. "That's your brave sticker." "I know." He pressed it into her palm. "So you'll remember me." Amanda looked at the little sticker for a long moment. "I promise I will." Daniel hugged her unexpectedly before running back to his mother. Amanda watched them leave together through the sliding glass doors. She carefully placed the Spider-Man sticker inside her wallet, right beside Rosa's grocery receipt, right beside the faded blue wristband. 3 small objects, 3 different stories, 1 shared lesson. Kindness, when passed from one person to another, never becomes smaller. It multiplies. And for the first time since the night she lost her mother, Amanda realized Memorial Valley was no longer defined by its greatest failure. It was beginning to be remembered for its greatest change. The first Monday of every month became known throughout Memorial Valley Hospital as Orientation Day. New physicians, new nurses, receptionists, transport aides, housekeepers, volunteers, maintenance technicians, food service employees. Everyone attended together. Amanda insisted on it. Some administrators questioned the decision during the first year. Shouldn't physicians have a separate leadership session? Amanda had smiled. Patients don't experience separate hospitals. They experience one. So everyone learned together. On a bright autumn morning nearly 3 years after Amanda had become CEO, another orientation began. 36 new employees sat quietly in the education center. Some looked excited, others nervous. Several had notebooks already open. A projector displayed only one sentence: "Welcome to Memorial Valley. No mission statement, no financial statistics, no organizational chart." Amanda stepped to the front of the room carrying a small wooden box. She placed it gently on the table. No one knew what was inside. "Good morning." "Good morning," the room answered. Amanda looked around slowly. "I could spend today talking about policies, safety procedures, quality measures, clinical standards." She smiled, and all of those things matter. She opened the wooden box. Inside rested a single faded blue hospital wristband. The room became completely silent. Amanda lifted it carefully. "This belonged to my mother." She waited several seconds before continuing. "Years ago, she came through our emergency department wearing this. She never came home." No one moved. Several employees lowered their eyes. Amanda continued calmly. "For a long time, I believed this wristband represented the worst thing that had ever happened to my family." She looked around the room. "I don't believe that anymore." A young respiratory therapist frowned slightly. Amanda noticed. "It now represents a promise." She held the wristband higher. "A promise that no patient entering this hospital will ever become just another number." She slowly walked across the room. "When families arrive here, they're frightened. They're exhausted. They're confused. Many have already imagined the worst." She paused beside a newly hired receptionist. "You may be the first face they see." She continued walking, stopping beside a maintenance worker. "You may fix the elevator that gets a patient to surgery." Beside a housekeeper. "You may clean the room where someone receives life-changing news." Beside a dietary employee. "You may prepare the first meal someone eats after surviving the hardest night of their life." She smiled warmly. "No role here is small." She returned to the front. "My mother taught me something before she died." Amanda reached into the same wooden box. This time she removed a folded grocery receipt. The paper looked fragile with age. She carefully unfolded it. 4 handwritten words appeared. "Be kind anyway." Amanda looked up. She wrote these words on the back of a grocery receipt. She never imagined hundreds of people would one day read them. The room remained silent. Amanda placed both items inside a glass display case standing beside the podium. Below them rested a small engraved plaque. "Every wristband belongs to someone's whole world, Never forget. When the orientation ended, nobody hurried toward the door. Many employees walked quietly to the display case. Some stood there reading the plaque. Others simply looked at the faded wristband. One young nurse wiped away tears. Amanda stepped into the hallway. Emily Carter caught up with her. "You still tell it exactly the same way." Amanda smiled. "Because it still matters." Emily laughed softly. "I don't think I'll ever hear it without crying." "You probably shouldn't." Emily nodded. "I hope I never do." Later that afternoon, Amanda received an email from the Pennsylvania Hospital Association. Memorial Valley had been selected to receive the state's Patient Trust and Compassion Award. Mark Henderson walked into her office carrying a printed copy. "You've seen it?" Amanda nodded. "They're recognizing the whole staff." "As they should." Mark sat across from her desk. "You know," he smiled, "when we first met, I thought you were going to rebuild this hospital." Amanda laughed. "I hope I have." He shook his head. "You rebuilt something much harder." "What?" He looked toward the emergency department through the office window. "Trust." Amanda didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the framed display hanging on the wall opposite her desk. Inside another shadow box rested 3 objects: Rosa's blue wristband, the grocery receipt, Daniel's Spider-Man sticker. Visitors often asked why the sticker was there. Amanda always answered the same way. Because kindness doesn't end with one generation. That evening, she left the executive office later than usual. As she walked through the main lobby, she noticed a familiar teenager helping an elderly woman complete registration paperwork. Ethan. Now taller than Amanda, with broad shoulders and the same gentle eyes his grandmother had once had. He volunteered every Monday after school. The elderly woman apologized repeatedly. "I'm so slow." Ethan smiled. "We're not in a race." She laughed nervously. "I've never been good with forms." "I'll help." "No charge? No hurry." Amanda stood quietly across the lobby watching. He never noticed her. He wasn't helping because she was watching. He was helping because it had become part of who he was. After the woman disappeared toward the clinic, Ethan finally turned and saw Amanda. "Mom? You finished work?" "I did." He smiled. "I'll be home in a minute." Amanda walked over. "You were patient with her." He shrugged. "Grandma would have been." Amanda felt tears gathering again. "So would you." They walked toward the parking lot together. The evening air felt cool. Leaves drifted across the sidewalk. Just before reaching the car, Ethan asked, "Do you ever think about that night anymore?" Amanda looked toward the glowing hospital entrance. She answered honestly, "Every day." He looked worried. "Does it still hurt?" Amanda smiled gently. "Yes." She placed one hand over her wallet where the blue wristband still rested. "But pain isn't the first thing I remember anymore." "What is?" She looked through the glass doors. A volunteer was offering coffee to a worried husband. A nurse knelt to speak with a frightened child. A housekeeper held an elevator open for an elderly couple. Emily laughed with a patient in the hallway. Rebecca welcomed another family by name. Amanda smiled. "I remember what happened because of it." They stood together watching the hospital for another moment. 3 years earlier, Amanda had walked out of those same doors believing she had lost everything. Tonight she realized something Rosa had understood all along. Kindness never erased tragedy, but it refused to let tragedy have the final word. The next morning, before the first employees arrived, sunlight streamed through the hospital lobby and settled softly upon the glass display case. The faded blue wristband glowed beneath the warm light. Visitors passed without knowing the entire story. They didn't need to. Every employee who walked past it already knew. Every patient who entered those doors benefited because of it. Every frightened family who was greeted with compassion became another chapter in Rosa Perez's invisible legacy. One ordinary woman who had once waited too long had changed an entire hospital, not through anger, but through courage, forgiveness, and the quiet determination to make sure no one else would ever have to wait alone. Some wounds never completely disappear, and perhaps they aren't meant to. The deepest pain in our lives can become the strongest reason to protect someone else from experiencing the same heartbreak. Amanda Perez could have walked away from the place that reminded her of loss forever. Instead, she chose the more difficult path. She returned not to punish people, but to change a system. That choice transformed grief into purpose and memory into hope. Real leadership is not measured by titles, wealth, or authority. It is measured by the number of lives made safer, kinder, and more dignified because someone cared enough to act. Sometimes the greatest legacy we leave behind isn't something we build with our hands. It's a standard of compassion that continues long after we're gone. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes kindness matters. We'd love to know where you're watching from and what lesson stayed with you the most. And if you'd like to hear more stories about ordinary people whose quiet courage changes lives in extraordinary ways, don't forget to subscribe and join us on the next journey.